the facts and future of light rail here in Valley Metro. My name is Suzanne Day from Valley Metro Commute Solutions.
And I'm Lillian Duarte from Valley Metro. Welcome.
And our speaker and star of the show today,
Scott Smith, the CEO of Valley Metro.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, and welcome to all those who are out there in the audience. First of all, I'd like to introduce you a little bit to Valley Metro and who we are. We are primarily responsible for public transportation in Metro Phoenix, and Valley Metro, along with the City of Phoenix, who provides bus service inside the city, and we provide bus and paratransit throughout the metropolitan area outside the city. But we also plan, build, design, build, operate the light rail system in Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, that we'll get into in just a little bit. Just to let you know the platform from which we operate, we have a set of core values which you see in front of you. And basically, we are driven by one common core purpose, and that is to connect communities and enhance lives. Everything we do is based on this objective, and we follow certain core values such as whatever it takes, being team players, positive customer care. And so as we go through this, please understand that we are committed to public transportation, and we are committed to our mission and the public that we serve, because we recognize that we have a huge impact on people's lives. And what is that impact, and how many people do we actually serve? Well, most people don't believe that in a western city like Phoenix, like Metro Phoenix, that you literally would have nearly 70 million passengers in public transportation in a given year. And that's where we are right now. We're, as you can see on the graph there, we are divided between our workhorse, which is our bus system, and we call it our show horse, which is our light rail system. A couple of things I'd like you to point out on this graph is that, number one, I think the sheer size of our ridership, almost 250,000 commuters a day, that is what most people don't really realize. Also a trend which has been noted around the country, which is there's been a leveling off or even a slight decrease in our total ridership. This is not uncommon for transit in the country. I spent a lot of time talking to experts in the area, and nobody can really figure out exactly what the cause of this is, although the most likely reasons is there's a direct relationship between our ridership and the economy. And you throw gas prices in there, and all of a sudden you have ridership. As a matter of fact, our peak ridership, which was over 72 million, happened during the height of the Great Recession, or I should say the depths of the Great Recession. So when people ask me what can we do to increase ridership, I say, well, our marketing plan is give me another deep recession and $4 a gallon gas, and our ridership will go through the ceiling. Obviously, that's not what we want. So we are a public service. We serve those who either need public transportation or choose to ride public transportation. And in Phoenix, that means about 13–14% of daily commuters ride public transportation, which percentage-wise, we are a western city. We're a car-oriented city, but that's still quite a large number of people that are taken off the roads and go to work, school, play, whatever their reason, using public transportation. Today, we're going to focus on the issue that is most hotly discussed and debated, and especially is relevant now because of the ballot measure, which is going before Phoenix voters, and that is our light rail system. This is a map of the light rail system. As I said, it transverses 3 communities, Phoenix, Tempe, and Mesa, connects 3 downtowns, 28 miles, and we just celebrated about 6 months ago the 10th anniversary of the opening of the Valley Metro rail system. There are a lot of doubters. There are doubters about rail in general in the western U.S., and especially light rail in places like Phoenix, which are really post-World War II boom towns, obviously very car-centric, automobile, and yet the question as to whether rail would succeed by all objective standards has been answered, and that is yes. This city and this community has embraced rail as a viable form of transportation, of development, and we wanted to see exactly what those standards were. So to commemorate the 10th year anniversary, we went and we our staff and others got together and put together a quality of life report. And this quality of life report will, which I'll go over in just a second after we have a short little poll, we'll talk about some of the data and information that that is the scorecard of the changes that light rail has brought about in its 10 years in existence. So I'm going to turn over to Lillian now to talk to you about a little bit about the poll.
Great, thank you, Scott. So we would just like to know what form or forms of public transit have you used anywhere at any time. If you can just select all those that apply, we just kind of give us an idea and even maybe remind you about the forms of transit that you have used or currently use. So we'll keep that poll open for just a few seconds and get your feedback. Then we'll share with the group what the numbers look like. So about 5 more seconds and then we're going to close that poll. And all right, let's take a look. So it looks like 59% of you have used light rail, 41% local bus, 23% express or rapid bus, 5% streetcar, and 21% none of the above. Great.
Well, good.
Thank you.
Well, for those of you who have used light rail in Phoenix, you are not alone. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned, the ridership for the year, I'm going to go through a few little statistics here. We actually carry over 16 million riders a year. I always have a little chuckle when people say that nobody rides light rail in Phoenix. Nobody except for the nearly 45,000 riders every day, which is almost the equivalent of a sold-out Sun Devil Stadium over at Arizona State University. But there's something more telling about this, and that is not only that there's 16 million riders, but let's put it in context. If you look at your screen, right below the 16.5 million is another very interesting piece of data. And that is a 2.8 million riders in 2007. This red line bus line followed almost exactly the light rail route that we have today through the city, 3 cities that light rail traverses. And as you can see, there were just under 3 million riders that took that bus line just prior to light rail opening in 2008. Now we have 16 million in that same transit corridor riding light rail. There is no doubt that light rail has brought people back into the central city. Light rail is carrying people that otherwise did not ride public transportation through the central city and through the cities that we're talking about. And that to me is the most telling statistic about the impact that light rail has had. We, as many other Western cities, developed the big donut hole in the middle where sprawl took growth to the suburbs, and the central city was in many ways abandoned. And Phoenix was no different than others. Light rail now cuts through the middle of that donut hole and is filling it back in and bringing people back to the city.
It really is.
And one of the reasons why it's doing that is that there is a real impact on commute times. I know when I travel on light rail, it's nice to be able to go down the street and pass cars that are stopped or held up by congestion, and there's no doubt that people benefit from being in public transportation. The other thing is that light rail has changed the corridor in positive ways. Any public investment in infrastructure, and especially transportation infrastructure, will attract investment and will attract business activity. In the light rail corridor, this activity has actually created an influx of jobs that did not exist in that corridor before. You see 35,000 jobs that are now along the light rail that did not exist before 2008 in that same corridor. So an influx of jobs because businesses have invested and have moved in the corridor. The other thing about filling in the donut hole is that we have almost 25,000 housing units, of which over 2,200 are new workforce or affordable housing. So there's been an influx of residential development, and much of that development, a good portion of it, are units that cater to the workforce development. As a matter of fact, that investment in residential is only part of the incredible real estate investment that's happened along the light rail line. These are not some economist estimates. The numbers you see, $11 billion in real estate investment, are actual construction and other activities that have happened in the last 10 years, not only along the corridor, but adjacent or within a half mile of each light rail station. This has been primarily driven by residential development. There has been commercial and some public investments, such as Arizona State University in downtown. Would not have happened, according to Michael Crow, president, without light rail coming to downtown Phoenix. And we have other developments, such as the cityscape development, which is directly related to light rail. We have other uses in things that in areas where multifamily and higher density housing have been built on. For example, this picture where the Muse is was a vacant lot for literally decades, and now is multifamily. It's not just been in Phoenix, also in Tempe, especially in the area of Arizona State University's campus, where things have gone. And then in Mesa, this, believe it or not, is an affordable housing, workforce development. Although it is just a stunning development and a great example of the mixed types of development that happen in all cities. We have other new uses. This is nearing completion in downtown Phoenix, called the Block 23. Actually, the ground floor of that is a grocery store, which will be the first full-service grocery store in downtown Phoenix in, I think, over 20 years. This is a combination of the building you're looking at right now is office portion, and in the background, residential, taking up an entire city block. We have the same thing happening in Tempe, where along our new streetcar system, we have a Whole Foods, which is on the bottom floor, and residential on top. And even in Mesa, where we have one of our greatest success stories, downtown Mesa had not experienced a single or issued a single new home construction permit in 30 years prior to light rail arriving in August of 2015. Since that time, and these are numbers that are given to us by the city of Mesa, there has been nearly $500 million in projects that have either already been built, are planned, or are under construction. One of the planned is right here, this mixed use development called The Grid, which is in planning stages and will go into downtown Mesa. This is all because of our regional light rail system, which is, if you've lived here at all, you know that in this corridor, as I've said, these were areas that were once thriving and then entered the donut hole and have been struggling, and now they're being reborn. Our system, as you can see, and this is with all the proposed extensions in the regional system, this stems through the next upwards to 66 miles over the next 2 to 3 decades, that if it's all built out. We have certain things that are under construction right now. For example, we just finished a new station on 50th Street in Washington, Phoenix. The important thing about this is, as you can see by the picture, this station is literally right in front of one of our regional centers, mobility centers, that serves the disabled community, Ability 360. We designed this station in conjunction with Ability 360, and it really takes accessibility to new heights. All of our stations, of course, are ADA compliant, but this one is really designed with certain functions and amenities that really serve the disabled community. And in the 1 month since it's been open, it's had almost more use than many of our other stations. Just a couple of 3 weeks ago, we opened a brand new extension into Mesa, 2-mile extension to Gilbert Road in Mesa, which meant our system grew from 26 miles to 28 miles. Just for context, when it opened 8 or 10 years ago, the original system was 20 miles. So it's grown by 40% in the 10 years since it's opened. And we have other systems that are under construction. This is the Tempe streetcar, which is a loop system that serves downtown Tempe, loops around Arizona State University campus, and connects with light rail so that people there in Tempe can have an alternative and an option in transportation. The interesting thing about the Tempe streetcar that I like to show is that I show this picture. This is the streetcar picture. As you can see, it's very different from a light rail vehicle. It's smaller, it's single car, but there is something also that's different. If you look at this if you look at this picture, you will notice that there is one thing that's missing in the picture, and it isn't a mistake. I'll give you a second to look at it. Most of you probably have guessed already. There's no wires above the car. And that's because this is a hybrid propulsion. This runs on both electric power, the wire power, and also battery power. So as it's going through downtown Tempe, which is what this image is right now, the pantograph, which is the connector to the wire, lowers, and it runs on battery power. About a 3-mile section is under construction right now.
That is very cool.
It is very
Very
cool.
cool. Yeah.
So this is our system once again in a little different map as we see it today with the extension. You can see that as it goes through these cities, it passes through a variety of very important locations and venues, such as Arizona State, Benedictine University, downtown Phoenix with all its sports facilities and museums, and it works. This, as I've said, by all objective standards, this works. We have 3 primary light rail projects in the city of Phoenix that we're working on that will change this system, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. The first one is an extension out of downtown headed due south down Central Avenue to South Central, and some work in downtown that will create some enhancements to our existing system. The second, and this project is actually totally designed. The Federal Transit Administration has approved it to entry in engineering, has not committed, but they have defined an amount that they will participate in. And so we're ready to start construction on this. The Northwest Extension is about half designed. It will take the light rail from its current endpoint in Northwest Phoenix at 19th Avenue and Dunlop. It will go north and jump over I-17. Well, actually won't jump over, it'll follow a bridge to end up in the Metro Center project. Metro Center, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Metro Phoenix, was the largest regional indoor mall. About 1.5 million square feet, a very large mall, opened in the early 70s. As many regional malls have, it's transitioned. At one point, it had 5 major department stores. It's now in a transition to be reborn as a transit-oriented development, a mixed use with light rail going to be literally delivering passengers right to the middle of that development. Very exciting. The third project we're working on, which is in the early stages of design and environmental work, is what we call the Capitol I-10 West. It's in 2 phases. The first one goes from downtown to the state capitol, west, and the second one would go further along in Phoenix along Interstate 10, clear out to 79th Avenue, about 11 miles out there. Now, once these projects are completed, this is what our system will look like. And the main difference is, it now becomes a 2-line system with meeting point in downtown, and it will completely change how light rail interacts with the city of Phoenix and how the city of Phoenix and the region interact with light rail. So we have another poll coming up now, so I'm going to turn it over to Lillian to introduce you to that poll.
Great, thanks again, Scott. So this poll, we would just like to know, which light rail project are you most excited about? South Central, Downtown Hub, Northwest Extension, Phase 2 to Metro Center, or Capitol I-10 West? So if you can take a couple of seconds to give us your feedback, we'd greatly appreciate it. And
This time we're making them choose. You have to
We
choose which
definitely-
one you're most excited about. I know which one I'm excited about because it's closest to my neighborhood.
I just want to make one thing very clear, because we're going to start talking now about an initiative that's on the ballot. As Valley Metro, we are not advocate. We don't advocate in an election. We're not here in an advocacy mode, but we do feel a responsibility, and we are fulfilling that responsibility to educate and inform. You can make up your mind for yourselves. You can decide, but we want you to have the facts and the data. And so the things we're pointing out here are facts, and they talk about what we've done and what has been accomplished over 10 years. And in a minute, we're going to talk about the future and how these future events will impact the system as we now know it.
Great. Okay, well, we look at the results from our poll. It looks like 28% are excited about South Central, 35% the Northwest Extension, and 37% the Capitol I-10 West.
Looks like it's pretty evenly split. Everyone's excited.
Right?
Well, here's the one thing that is a fact, and once again, now we're moving into the light rail initiative, and that is that if this initiative passes, none of those extensions that you just voted on would be built, and that is really the most basic result of the initiative. What I'd like to do is start and talk to you about the history of voter participation in ballot measures related to light rail. The first light rail election that was successful was actually in the city of Tempe, a little over 20 years ago. Tempe in 1996 voters voted to approve a dedicated transportation tax, which for the first time called out light rail and specifically funded a light rail, both the building and the operation of light rail system inside the city of Tempe. Well, the city of Tempe isn't a very big city, and a light rail system just only in that side of the city wouldn't do a whole lot of good. But 4 years later, the city of Phoenix voters approved Transit 2000. And in this ballot measure, for the first time, there was a specific map for Phoenix voters of light rail projects, including, this was the first time that the South Central project and a light rail running down Central Avenue, Baseline Avenue was on an election. 4 years later, county voters approved Proposition 400. This was a countywide transportation initiative that imposed a half-cent sales tax, transportation specific, which was split between freeways, highways, arterial streets, and public transportation. Included in that were funds to build, not operate, but build a light rail system. And that was a 20-year tax that is in effect through the end of 2025, and we are currently collecting that tax. Then in August 2015, Phoenix voters went back to the polls and to vote on Prop 104, which is known as T2050. Transit 2000 was a 20-year tax, which meant it was due to expire literally next year. And in 2015, the citizens of Phoenix were asked to extend that tax another 30 years, clear out to 2050, and to increase it, almost doubling the tax from 0.4% to 0.7%. This is a transportation specific tax. It is this initiative in 2015 that this ballot measure that the current light rail initiative is targeting. The current initiative started with controversies related to the South Central project. There were a number of business owners, residents, and others who had issues with the design and even the construction of the light rail route planned down Central Avenue, the South Central extension. They raised these questions and these issues with the city council on three different occasions, and on all three, I think it was 3 occasions, the city council voted to reaffirm the project and to move forward. That led to others getting involved and ended up with this initiative. So what is this initiative? Let's talk about it. First of all, this is a city of Phoenix, not a regional initiative. That's important to note. Unlike Prop 400, this is City of Phoenix residents and voters voting primarily as a follow-up to the election in 2015. It specifically targets light rail, current projects, as I mentioned, those 3 projects and others. It was filed in November of last year, and the city clerk verified signatures and the city council called for the election this August. A lot of people ask me, why August? Well, election dates are actually set by state law and city ordinance. And this was the first election date that was available under state law after the signatures were verified, and that's why we have an August election. So what is the initiative? Well, I found out the best way to talk about the initiative is to use the words of the initiative itself. So what you see on your screen is actually just a cut and paste from the actual initiative. I've added the red highlights so we can talk about certain sections of it. The first thing to know is that this initiative is an amendment to the Phoenix City Charter. That means it's a big deal. A charter to a city is a city's constitution. That means that things that are amended or included in the charter cannot be changed, altered by city councils or anyone else. It can only be changed or altered or added to or repealed by a vote of the citizens. So if this initiative is approved, that means that it will be the law in Phoenix forever until there's another vote of the citizens. So it is a very serious matter and should be taken.
Big deal.
It is a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It will change things forever. So that's it. And what it does is, as we've said, it terminates the construction of Phoenix light rail extensions. It redirects the monies that would be spent on these light rail extensions to finance infrastructure improvements, specifically in South Phoenix, to talking about those people and activists in South Phoenix pushing some of the investment or a good chunk of the investment to South Phoenix, and then the rest would be spread around the city. And so there's some definitions in there that I'd like to go into a little bit deeply, using once again the words of the initiative. And this is when we talk about immediately terminate all light rail extensions. This is from the definitions of that. It talks about the light rail extensions, but the initiative doesn't only cover light rail. It covers other things, but it also it's interesting because it doesn't say you can't build. What it says is it does not authorize or appropriate to expend any funds from any source. In other words, it precludes the city of Phoenix from spending any money. So if you want to plan, go ahead, but the city of Phoenix cannot spend one penny. So that's how it effectively kills the light rail. But it also does something else besides that. It not only includes light rail extensions, but as you can see in the reading there, in furtherance of any light rail extension or any other fixed rail line transit system. So the city of Phoenix is precluded from spending any money for planning, construction, or anything else of any fixed rail line, except for the People Move at Sky Harbor. What this means is that not only light rail extensions that are on the map, but since this is a charter amendment, things such as commuter rail, intercity rail, Amtrak, if they wanted to come, based on the wording here, City of Phoenix would not be allowed to spend any money on any of those passenger carrying rail. So this is an all rail, not just a light rail. So what it does is that it redirects the funds from the termination of light rail extensions. I go back to the title. What does it mean? What does the term infrastructure improvements mean? Well, the initiative, once again, it talks about infrastructure improvements means any and all construction, development, extension, expansion, improvements or repairs to public infrastructure that are related to transportation. Once again, this goes back to Prop 104, the T2050, which was a transportation-related ballot measure. Therefore, things such as we saw the rail, medians, sidewalks, roads, buses, electric bus, anything related to that, as long as it's not rail, these funds can be spent on, but they cannot be spent on any rail. That's the simple basic. And they can't be spent on non-transportation related items. You can't use it for libraries or police or anything else. It's just got to be transportation infrastructure. Now, that's important to know that that's where it's coming from. That it specifically targets T2050, but light rail is built from financing sources that go far beyond the city of Phoenix. As a matter of fact, the majority of funding comes from the federal government. I mentioned that the South Central project, almost about half of the cost of the South Central project, or a little more than half the projected cost of South Central, will be borne by the federal government. And in most of our rail projects, 40 to 50% or slightly above are paid for by the federal government through two primary programs. One is a grant program from the Federal Transit Administration. This is important because these grants are specifically targeted to one project. When you have a project, you apply for that grant, and that grant would be only for that project. So if that project goes away, that funding goes away. It's not able to be used for any other thing. Then there's something else called CMAQ, which we call congestion mitigation and air quality. Those funds are a smaller percentage. Those can be reapplied, although current policy has it they are used for rail transportation or light rail construction. The second source of funds are regional funds. We talked about the Prop 400. Prop 400 or its successor the T2050 program assumes there will be an extension or a successor of Prop 400 in 2025, and therefore the long-term rail program assumes that regional funding will pick up anywhere from 20 to 25% of the total cost of light rail construction. And then the last portion, about one-fifth to one-fourth, would come from City of Phoenix T2050 plan funds. So the initiative actually, if you recall, back from the wording, says that the Phoenix cannot use any funds from any source, but it's specifically, but the only funds that are specifically targeted are those T2050. And those are reallocated and used. All these other funds above there, as I've said, the federal grants cannot be used in those projects. They'll go to other projects in other cities, San Diego, Los Angeles, places that have these types of projects. Regional funds right now under current policy must be used for rail projects. That policy could be changed in the future, but for right now, those can only be used on rail projects. And if you cancel rail projects, they would go to other rail projects. So it's the T2050 funds that this initiative is specifically targeting, although it precludes the use of any other funds. So that's the initiative. Those are the facts about the initiative. As I said before, you can judge for yourself whether that's a good thing, bad thing, how that plays out, but at least you know what the initiative is all about, using the terms and the wording from the initiative itself. It brings into one part of the discussion, overall discussion on the future of transportation and especially of transit, because this is an important factor in determining whether continued investment is necessary. There's no doubt that transportation is going to change. One of the items that people constantly bring up is autonomous vehicles. What will we be doing in 10 years? Will we own cars? Will we be able to travel without worrying about the driving? There's no doubt that we are far along. When I say we, I mean the technological companies such as Waymo and others, and the car manufacturers are far along in autonomous vehicles, driverless vehicles. As a matter of fact, we are technically, and the technology is there that we could put driverless cars on the streets right now. Now, for safety reasons and legal reasons and other reasons, they always have a safety driver, but technologically, a car can drive by itself. The technology is there. We're just looking to see how this will all fit in to our normal day-to-day stuff. On transit, we want to look and see how that plays out too, because we recognize that people will be traveling differently than they do now. How will that impact us? At Valley Metro, we have entered into a pilot program with Waymo to talk about first mile, last mile, and integration with public transportation. We're also looking, excuse me, at things such as these microbuses. These are all autonomous vehicles that carry 10 to 12 people. There's no doubt that I think one of the big, most exciting parts about it, the automation, is that it will open areas that currently don't have buses to buses, because it's very expensive to run a 30 or 40 or 60 foot long bus with an operator. It's very expensive to run that route. We can meet more people and connect with more people if we have smaller autonomous vehicles that maybe are traveling on a circuit around your neighborhood, or maybe they're on demand. You go on to your to whatever device you have, and in less than 5 minutes, one of these buses shows up in front of your house or your business or wherever. We believe that this absolutely will be part of the future in that. Why is this important? Well, even though we have autonomous vehicles, the future of transportation is going to be determined by real estate. And that is simply that how much space do you have to transport people? As I mentioned in the beginning, Phoenix is a very car-centric, spread out area, as most Western cities and even most urban centers now, metro areas in America are. This is a picture that shows what it takes, the real estate it takes, to transport 200 people. And what we have is based on current trends, and we love to drive our cars, but we also like to drive our cars with nobody else in our car. It actually takes 177 cars to transport 200 people. And as you can see, you can't even see the end of the line of cars. We find out that most of the space that's used to transport people is in the car itself.
Look at that.
Here are the people sitting there, and you can see people don't take up very much space. It's the metal and rubber and plastic and glass of the car. Now, the reality is that even with autonomous vehicles, even with ride sharing, even with all the advances, you're still going to need that space in the vehicle. And so will it improve congestion? Well, there's arguments on both sides, but what we've seen so far with the shared ride, the Ubers and Lyfts, is that the basic law of transportation takes hold. And that is that if you make it easier to go places, guess what people do? They go more places. And that's why you're seeing in some of the metro areas, especially like New York, Chicago, that congestion has actually increased as ride sharing has increased because of that congestion. You can see that the way to solve that is to put people on high capacity public transportation. We're going to add 1 million people in Metro Phoenix over the next 5 to 7 years. Last year, 155,000 people moved in here. We're not building any more streets or widening the streets to match it. There's no doubt that high capacity public transportation will play a major role, because how do you take 1 million more people, and in the next 15 years, 2 million people, increasing by almost 40% our population, how do you move them around on the same size streets? No matter the increase in efficiencies, the fact of the matter is you have to figure out a way to do it more efficiently, and there's no better way than on a train, on a high capacity bus, express bus, something about, I believe public transportation will play a bigger role, a very different role, but a bigger role, which means that investment will need to continue to invest in public transportation. Here's how I think the system may work. I think we'll develop into somewhat of a hub and spoke system. You saw the pictures of the autonomous buses, the ride share. There's no doubt that if you live out in a suburb, that there will be options available to you that don't exist today, and there'll be options that were unimaginable. And people will use them. Why? Because they'll be more prevalent, they'll be more consistent, they'll be more dependable, and they'll be more effective. But what if you're going from, let's say, the eastern part of Metro Phoenix into downtown? You had travel 15, 20 miles to work. The fact of the matter is that congestion then becomes a huge issue to you. So I can see a time when actually you take that autonomous vehicle, that ride share, whatever it is, to perhaps a bus, a transit center, a bus station, a park and ride, or a train platform station, and then you ride that express bus or that train to another point where when you get off the train or the bus, there will be another car waiting for you. It'll be dependable. It'll be seamless. And that's how I see, 10, 15 years from now, a lot of people will be traveling. Right now, you can't do that because it's not seamless. There are wait times. We don't have cars waiting for you. But that is one thing that, once again, the technology already exists. And as we look at what is the future of Valley Metro, for example, we recognize that we will be doing business differently, but we think we'll be more in the long haul, high capacity business, which is one reason why we believe continued investment is very important. And the last thing is, why do we do this? I always finish any presentation with a picture of kids. When I was in elected office, I had a saying on the wall behind my desk, and it's a saying that I found very powerful. And we don't know exactly who this is. It was attributed to, it's been attributed to many different people. But what it says is that the true measure of success is to plant trees under whose shade you'll never stand. We've been very fortunate in this region to have leaders 20, 30, 40 years ago who planted trees under whose shade we are now standing and sitting. They took the risks, made the investments and the decisions to build a transportation system that has been effective and successful in Metro Phoenix. However you feel about this initiative, the only area I will advocate is that you get involved, that you study the issue, and that you make an educated decision. Because the one thing that is certain is that the result of this election will impact the next generation and the generation after that. It is a seminal, we say this about elections, this is a seminal election. And how this vote goes will determine how not only rail and light rail, but how transportation planning and initiatives and efforts happen in Phoenix for a long time. It's that important. So please, I will encourage you to study it out, to make an informed decision, and mostly to participate. Be there, vote, talk to your friends and neighbors, have a lively discussion, and however you come down on this issue, I hope you're engaged and involved. And I thank you very much for your time